Elizabeth Hines from OurPaleoFamily.com. We're having a really big thunderstorm right now that just started with hail and everything. So I'm sorry if that's loud. I will hopefully talk loud enough that you can hear me. And hopefully that will go away soon. That was God's not very good timing for my show, but that's okay. We're inside and we're dry and we're going to get started. So like I said, my name is Elizabeth Hines and I have a blog called OurPaleoFamily.com. And I'm a mom, and I have a husband and 2 children, an 11-year-old son and a 9-year-old daughter. And we are all paleo as a family. And so I'm going to talk to you about that tonight, and I'm going to cook one of our favorite recipes for you, and just kind of go through sort of a question and answer format. Some of the questions that people ask me all the time. And you have the option to ask questions in the comments, and I will do my best to answer those for you as we go along. If I don't get to your question, I will make sure I go back and answer it as soon as I'm finished with the show. So the first thing I want to do is start this recipe because it takes about 45 minutes, and then while it's cooking, there's a lot of hands-off time. I'll talk to you. So the recipe I'm going to make is called Baked Chicken Thighs with Citrus Glaze, and again it's on the blog. I'll make sure you like the KidCast page, is where you're watching this show. They have all sorts of great family-friendly programs, kid crafts, snacks that are also crafts, and mommy talk, lots of great information, so make sure you like the KidCast page. So in front of you here, let me scoot a little bit this way, I have what I need to make my chicken thighs with citrus glaze. And I know a lot of people cook with chicken breast. That's, I don't know, the American way, I guess. But when we started eating paleo, we started eating a lot of dark meat chicken because it's cheaper. There is a little bit more fat. There's really not that much more fat. Also, I usually buy bone-in, skin-on chicken because, again, it's cheaper, and I want to use those bones to make broth. So I'll make sure to use every bit of this. So I'm going to start with, so my family of 4, I'll usually buy 5 or 6 chicken thighs. You know, sometimes they're really small, sometimes they're big, and I like to have enough for the 4 of us to eat a meal, and then for my husband to take lunch the next day. We don't usually eat a lot of leftovers. So we just need enough for him to have one more serving. So 5 or 6 pieces of chicken will do it. I have already preheated my oven to 400 degrees. I'm going to use one of my grandma's old cast iron skillets. It's one of my favorite pans to cook with. I'm going to put a little bit of bacon fat in my skillet. One great thing about cooking with paleo, we're trying to be economical and use everything. And that means if I'm buying really good quality bacon, which I am, I'm going to save the fat because I can cook that to a really high temperature and it adds some great flavor. I'm going to put just about a tablespoon of my reserved bacon fat in my skillet and put that in the oven and get that really hot. Now the hard thing about cast iron skillets, the only thing I don't like is that I often forget that the handle is really hot and I need to use a hot pad every time I touch it. I'll end up setting it on the counter and burning my hands. So I'm going to lay out my chicken. You'll see my chicken here. Nice bone-in, skin-on chicken thighs. A lot of times wings and thighs will still have feathers on them. I'm not sure why those particular cuts of meat, but they do. So I just check, make sure there aren't any feathers. And if these were wet, I would take a paper towel and kind of dab it off, but these look pretty dry. I am going to grab my kitchen scissors and I'm going to cut. Sometimes there's just this really big extra piece of skin with fat. I'm going to cut that off because I like the skin. The skin doesn't bother me, the fat doesn't bother me, but there's no reason to have that really big extra piece on there. It'll just make a lot of grease in the skillet and it'll pop, and it's just unnecessary. I really recommend, if you don't have a good pair of scissors that you use in the kitchen, that's a great investment. These I got for Christmas. I get very exciting Christmas presents like vacuum cleaners and lawnmowers and kitchen scissors, but I do use them. They're practical. These are nice and sharp and they work really, really well. Much easier than fiddling with a knife. Okay, I'll just leave that there because that's all going in the trash. I'm going to take a second to wash my hands. Still here. And I'm going to season my chicken with salt and pepper on both sides. I'm not going to measure. I keep an 1/8 of a teaspoon measuring spoon in my little dish because we have eggs almost every day for breakfast. And for our family's taste, an 1/8 of a teaspoon of salt is the perfect amount for 2 eggs, which is what I usually cook and it's what my husband usually cooks. So I just keep that 1/8 of a teaspoon measure in there and it's looking in there. Just a little pepper. You don't really have to measure. If you are, I'll talk about this in a minute, but if you are following the autoimmune paleo or the autoimmune protocol, then you would probably want to leave out the black pepper, at least initially, if you're figuring out if pepper might be something that bothers you or causes some symptoms. Okay, so I've salted and peppered. I'm going to kind of pat that in. Okay, I'm going to set this here because I'm going to get my skillet out of the oven. I'm going to wash my hands again. Sorry for stepping out and listen to the rain. Okay, I do have my hot pad, so I'm not going to burn myself. Just kind of swirl this around and make sure the fat is totally covering. And I'm going to put my hot pad right there on top, or else I'm going to forget. And that I'm going to touch that. So I'm going to lay my chicken on my skillet's really hot. I'm going to lay it skin side down. That'll help that to get nice and crispy. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 6 today. And 6 are fitting perfectly in my skillet. And then this goes in the oven. That was really simple, right? Now while that bakes, I'm going to start on the sauce. So all we do with this chicken is the chicken bakes. You make a little sauce. After about 15 minutes, I'm going to set my timer. You baste it with the sauce, and then you flip it over, and you bake it for a few more minutes. And chicken thighs, unlike white meat, which gets really overcooked and dry very easily, I've never overcooked a piece of dark meat chicken. You can really cook it for a very long time, and I think it actually even gets better. So if your husband is late coming home from work, or if somebody comes in from the yard really muddy and you need to give them a bath, you can just park your chicken in the oven and it will be perfectly fine. So I'm going to get started on my sauce. This is sort of an Asian inspired sauce, and my kids love it. They get so excited when we're having this for dinner. So I'm going to start with an orange. I've already washed this orange, and I'm going to zest it. This is a microplane grater. If you don't have one of these, this is a great kitchen tool. It's really sharp, and it does a great job of taking the zest off, just that outer layer. You don't want to get down to the white part because that's bitter. But it takes all the good flavorful zest off. I use this sometimes to grate onions or garlic if I really just want that flavor, but I don't want anybody to bite into a piece of onion or a piece of garlic. There goes my oven getting up to temperature. I also use my microplane for nutmeg, fresh nutmeg, and fresh ginger, which this recipe, I have fresh ginger. I'm going to show it to you in case you don't know what that looks like. But I wrote this recipe one time. Just a second, I'm going to bang. It does tend to get stuck in the back, so you can scrape it out or just bang it. Most of it comes out. I wrote this recipe when I was in a hurry and I didn't have any fresh ginger, and so I made it with granulated or powdered ginger like you would bake with, and it was great. So we just keep it really simple. So then I'm going to juice this orange, and this is the base of my sauce. So if you like orange chicken or even sweet and sour chicken, General Tso's chicken, any of those with sort of a sweet flavored sauce at a Chinese restaurant, this is similar, but instead of using corn syrup and MSG, we're using all natural, real foods. Actually, this recipe calls for 1.5 tablespoons of honey, and I have this raw honey here that's really good. It's unprocessed. It's a real natural food, so it's okay on the paleo diet. But I'm actually doing a 21-day sugar detox right now. Been having a little too much honey and maple syrup lately, so we're cutting back, and I'm going to leave the honey out, and really it will be very good. There's so much sweetness in the orange, so in goes my orange juice. I don't have to measure, just the juice of one orange. Then you have all that pulp in the top. That's really good. There weren't any seeds or anything, so all of that goes in. You want to get all of that good orange flavor. We're in the summer now, so we don't have really good oranges. This one was left over. Okay, so I have my orange juice and my orange zest, and then I told you I have powdered ginger and powdered garlic. So this goes in. Once we get all of our ingredients in here, we're going to put this on the stove, and I'm going to just let it sort of simmer and thicken up while the chicken is baking, and then we'll start basting. Did you see what I did? I just put my garlic measuring spoon in my ginger. So the next time I go to use ginger for something sweet, it's going to taste like garlic, and that is not going to be good. So I'm going to have to label that and set it to the side and make sure that I do not use that for molasses cookies or gingerbread cookies, because that would not taste very good. The next thing I need is fish sauce. This is basically a fermented fish product, and it adds a lot of flavor to your dish, but it smells awful. Do not open this when your children are around. They'll think you're trying to kill them, and they will not be excited to eat this meal. But it's really actually very, very good. It adds a lot of flavor, kind of salty. Okay, let's put that to the side. And then we have coconut aminos, which is a coconut product, obviously. And it's the paleo person's, I'm just seeing how much I put in, 3 tablespoons. It's your paleo person's soy sauce. So soy is not allowed on the paleo diet. Again, I'll get into that in just a second. But coconut aminos has a similar flavor profile. So it goes in anything Asian that we're making, and put it in salad dressings, sauces, gravies, anything where you feel like, oh, I need just a little bit more, some kind of little special flavor. In goes the coconut aminos, and that usually does it. And then a teaspoon of Dijon mustard. You know what? I'm just going to squeeze it in because I don't feel like measuring it and then having to scoop it out of my little teaspoon. So if I get a little too much in or a little less than a teaspoon, it's going to be okay. And then, excuse me, I told you I'm leaving out the honey. I'm not going to put any salt or pepper in because I salted and peppered my chicken. And the fish sauce and the aminos are both kind of salty. And so I want to taste that before I add any more. So I'm going to give this a little stir, and I'm going to put it on my stove on low and let it just simmer. And I got to remember to take a look at that periodically and make sure it's not boiling over my stove. This is fresh ginger. I wanted to show you this in case you have never, it's a site with the grocery store tags on. It's this gnarly looking, it's a root. It smells really good. If you like sushi and you ever go and you eat that pickled ginger, it's this. It's a real food product. It's really, really flavorful. Like I said, I grated with that microplane grater. It makes it really small because, again, I don't think you want to eat a big piece of it. It could be very sharp, especially for your kids. But I just used the powder tonight, but I wanted to show you this anyway. So now that our chicken's in the oven, it has about 9 minutes this first time around, and then I'm going to pull it out and I'm going to spoon a little bit of the sauce on, and then I'm going to flip it over and bake it some more and get a sip of water. And I'm going to talk to you about paleo diet, what it is, why we do it. So paleo is short for Paleolithic, and some people say that the paleo diet is you eat foods that our ancestors, thousands or millions or billions, whatever you believe about the age of the earth and humans, foods that would have been around during that time. So that's kind of one way of looking at the paleo diet. I looked at it from a medical perspective, trying to solve a medical problem. And so we simply look at paleo as these are the foods that are inflammatory, and we leave those out. And so my particular situation is that I have Crohn's disease. I was very sick for a very long time and went to lots of doctors and had lots of tests, and nobody could figure out what was the matter with me. Ended up having emergency surgery. It was through that surgery and seeing the tissue in my digestive system that they said, okay, you have Crohn's disease. Met with a GI doctor in the hospital, and he said, take these immune suppressing drugs and you'll be probably okay for a while. You might have to take some other medicines down the road. Some of these medicines might make you really sick. There's a pretty good chance of cancer with some of them. You might have to have more surgeries. Stick to this diet that's very easy on the digestive system. So lots of simple carbohydrates, no nuts, no raw vegetables, kind of limit your cooked vegetables even. So I did what my doctor said, except for the part about the diet. It didn't seem to make sense to me that not eating vegetables and not eating nuts and seeds, things that I had heard were pretty good for me my whole life, that didn't seem like a good idea. So I took the medicine and I did everything he told me to do, except that I did eat my own diet. But the diet I was following was just your standard American diet of mostly low fat, lean meats, lots of vegetables and fruits, whole grains, lots of whole grains, whole wheat bread. I made my own bread for a long time. Added gluten to the bread because that's how you get your homemade bread to have that similar sort of soft texture as grocery store bread, which is really funny to all of us now that I used to go into the store asking for where's the gluten. So that was our standard diet that we followed for about the first 4 years of my diagnosis. And then through a friend whose daughter had been diagnosed with an autoimmune disease, I learned about paleo and I started researching it, and my eyes were really opened. I had never heard of paleo. I certainly hadn't heard of it in terms of solving a health problem. And so I started reading all that I could about it, and I thought, this, I think, is the way I want to go. And I started reading more about the medicines that I was taking, and I realized how they could be causing a lot of problems for me. And I knew, I'm taking immune suppressing drugs. At church on Sunday when we passed the peace and everybody's shaking hands, I got to then sneak the hand sanitizer afterwards because I'm afraid, anybody's little germ, I'm going to get it and it could become worse than me because my immune system is compromised. And that's not a very nice way to live. So when I learned about paleo, I thought, okay, I think we can give this a try. And so I did a search at the library for paleo books, and I have to show you this book because I love this book. You can see I have all sorts of pages in here. This is Practical Paleo by Diane Sanfilippo. She's a podcast called Balance Bites, which I listen to, she and Liz Wolfe. Lots of great information there, really fun. But this book I checked out from the library. She has information in the front, and she has meal plans, and then she has recipes. And I read the information. I picked a meal plan. She has meal plans for if you have heart disease, if you have diabetes, if you want to lose weight, if you just want to try paleo, if you have autoimmune disease. She has all these different variations on the diet and on meal plans, and tells you breakfast, lunch, and dinner what you eat. I picked a meal plan and I cooked all of her recipes. Just followed the meal plan, and the food was so good. I thought, the kids are going to complain, my husband is going to complain, I'm a good cook, I know how to make foods that taste really good and people enjoy eating them, and they're not going to enjoy eating these foods. But the fact is, every recipe was delicious, and this one that I'm making tonight is really a riff on one of hers. We just have modified it for our tastes. So this book, this Practical Paleo, I really highly recommend it if you're interested in giving paleo a try. And it was surprising, it was exciting that the food was really good. Have I said that? Food was really good. When you take out all the processed and the white flour and the white potatoes and all of these whole grains, a lot of these foods that we're told are so healthy for us, first of all, they're not, and second of all, they don't have a lot of flavor. So you end up adding in these herbs and lots of vegetables and foods that do have a lot of flavor, and the food tastes really amazing. So I told you that I have Crohn's, which is an autoimmune disease, and my husband actually has type 1 diabetes, which is also an autoimmune disease. I didn't always know that it was, but sometime in the last few years they've made that determination that yes, in fact, it is autoimmune in nature. My kids, therefore, are at a greater risk of developing autoimmune disease. And as far as we know, they don't have any disease right now, but my daughter had stomach pain for several years intermittently, and we couldn't figure out what was wrong with her. And I know what I went through trying to figure out what was wrong with my stomach, why I was in so much pain all the time. And I didn't want her to have all of these scopes and to be sedated, and I just didn't want her to have to go down that long road and then potentially not find out what was wrong with her. So when I first started eating paleo, yes, we did it as a family, but they still ate lots of non-paleo foods. When we ate out, they ate whatever they wanted. And when she started having stomach pain, I thought, you know, we need to go all the way. She needs to really follow paleo. So does my son. But, you know, he was fine, so he got a few more treats. And when he's in Boy Scouts, so he would go way with Boy Scouts, he could just eat whatever. So he was eating pizza and chicken nuggets and sandwiches, all kinds of things. But then he started developing these tics. You know what I mean? Like a behavioral problem that he couldn't control. And he knew he was doing it, but he couldn't control it. And so I started reading about the connection between leaky gut and the brain and gluten in the brain, and I thought, you know, he needs to do this too. So everybody's paleo now. This is our first summer of sending the kids to camp and having to send special food, and we certainly don't make them be 100% paleo, but they are gluten-free when they're at camp. And so I've just been telling you kind of our history, but I need to tell you actually what paleo is, the foods that you include and the foods that you leave out. And it's basically a whole foods diet. You're eating real foods, but you're leaving out grains, all grains. So that's wheat, corn is a grain, rice, you're leaving out all the grains, and you're leaving out dairy and legumes, which includes soy and peanuts. I was very disappointed about peanuts. I love my peanut butter. And refined sugars and refined vegetable oils. There's my chicken, so I'm going to get that out. I'm going to pause the paleo talk. I'm restarting my timer. I have my sauce here. I didn't reduce a whole lot, but that's okay. I'll put it back on. So I'm going to flip my chicken over. It started to brown on the skin side. Can you see that just a little bit? Okay. Did I show you my sauce? Pretty much just looks like orange juice. A little bit darker than orange juice because of the coconut aminos. And the pulp from the orange is really good. The juice will sort of caramelize on the chicken. It's gotten quiet. I think it's still raining outside, but there's no more hail, and it is no longer thundering like crazy, so I'm thankful for that. Okay, so this goes back on the stove. Keep reducing. Got my hot pad. Haven't burned myself yet. This goes back in the oven for about 15 more minutes, and I am going to take another sip of water, excuse me. So I was talking to you about what paleo is and what paleo is not. So if you take out the grains and the legumes and the dairy and the refined oils and the refined sugars, what you're left with are meats and fruits and vegetables. And then we have natural sweeteners like honey I talked about and maple syrup. We don't do agave. stevia. So try to stick with as whole and natural foods as possible. There are different versions of paleo. Paleo is not something that's regulated by the government or FDA or anything. So the guy who wrote the first book on paleo, Dr. Lauren Cordain, his version of paleo is very, very strict. And he even, besides just saying meat, he really wants you to stick with low-fat meats and very low salt. And then this other guy came along, Mark Sisson, and he coined the term primal. And his primal philosophy actually includes dairy, though not just run-of-the-mill dairy. You should really have full-fat dairy from grass-fed cows. Not all the time, but dairy is okay. He really promotes the 80-20 rule, so 80% of the time you are sticking with this paleo or primal diet, and 20% of the time you can eat whatever you want. And so I kind of went with his guidelines at the very beginning because that sounded really good to me. It's like, okay, I already have some recipes that are really good, paleo recipes, so I can make those 80% of the time. He says I can have good quality chocolate every day, and 20% of the time I can eat whatever I want. So when we go out to eat, which is not very often, maybe once a week, I can eat whatever I want. But the more I read about paleo, especially dealing with autoimmune disease, I realized, you know, the 80-20 rule is not for me. If you are someone who wants to try paleo for weight loss or just some mild symptoms, maybe 80-20 rule. Or if you think it's going to be really hard for you to stick with something that you perceive as being very strict 100% of the time, then the 80-20 rule might work for you. But if you're in a place where you are sick, then you need to be as close to 100% as possible. And that's the way I am. My husband, he eats more sugar than he should. He eats certainly a decent amount of dairy, not a lot because I don't really cook with it. If we have pizza, I make some paleo pizzas, then I'll usually include cheese for all of us. We'll all eat the cheese. The kids do drink milk. They will eat cheese for snacks. The dairy doesn't seem to bother them as long as we keep it limited and we keep it to good quality. He eats dessert. My husband eats dessert. That's usually my desserts that I've made. So they're made with paleo ingredients. So he's eating a lot of sugar. And when he eats out, he will sometimes eat a regular meal. He'll have gluten. But it's much less. And his diabetes is very well controlled. He's taking less insulin than he was taking before. His hemoglobin A1C, which is kind of the long-term marker of his health in terms of his diabetes, that number is, you want it as low as possible, and his is down since switching to the paleo diet. My son's tics have disappeared, and they'll come back occasionally. He just had an episode this spring where he went to a scouting event. We said, okay, you can have a donut. Well, he had a donut, and then they served pizza for lunch, and he ate the pizza, and we had not sent other food, and he immediately developed some of these behaviors again. And it takes about 6 weeks for gluten to get out of your system. I'm keeping my eye on my sauce because I hear it sizzling over there, and I want it to bubble, but I don't want it to bubble over on my stove because that is a mess to clean up. So I'm just keeping an eye on it. I also don't want it to reduce down to nothing. And my daughter, her stomach pains have gone away for the most part. She occasionally will complain, though it's almost always after she's eaten a gluten-free food, like, you know, a gluten-free version of a regular food, a cracker. We found a bread that is pretty good that doesn't seem to bother her, but a lot of the snack bars that are gluten-free will really upset her stomach. Gluten-free products are great in that they're an option, but they have a lot of stuff in them that you really don't want. They have a lot of sugar. They have a lot of refined sugar. They usually have the refined oils, and those still tend to upset her stomach. As for me with my Crohn's, I was basically put in remission from my surgery. They removed all my diseased tissue. They put me on these medicines, and I felt great. I felt really, really good. Which is why I didn't fight with the doctor about taking the medicines, and I wasn't looking for something else because I had felt so bad for so long, and then after this surgery I felt really good, and I was just enjoying feeling well and being able to eat without being in pain. But then as I learned more, I realized that I really should not be on those medicines. So my motivation for paleo was to get off all of the medicine, which is very rare for somebody with Crohn's disease to not be on any kind of medication, to not have any symptoms. I have no symptoms. I forget that I have this disease until I go to the doctor and I'm filling out the medical form. Oh yeah, I do have this disease. And I wanted to still feel well. So I do see a functional medicine doctor, and he is an MD, and he is all for this way of life, and he is watching my blood work and keeps me on different supplements and things, but I'm not on these strong immune suppressing drugs that carry a very high risk of lymphoma. So I'm very happy about that. So our family has been a real success story with paleo. And some other common autoimmune diseases that you've probably heard of and maybe don't realize are autoimmune: multiple sclerosis, psoriasis, I'm drawing a blank now, irritable bowel syndrome, which is part of IBD, irritable bowel disease. Crohn's is part of that. Any of these diseases that are inflammatory, there are about 80 known autoimmune diseases that affect any part of the body. And not only autoimmune diseases can be affected by the paleo diet, but very simple symptoms like headaches, chronic migraines, fatigue. A lot of times people just feel like, oh, you know, my stomach's kind of upset after I eat these kinds of foods. Well, first of all, I would not eat those kinds of foods, but a very easy food group to leave out is gluten, and see how you feel. You can always do it step by step. I am going to go through for you some of the questions that people ask me. If you are watching live and you have a question, you can certainly leave a comment and I'll try to answer your question. I'll either answer it now or I'll go back and answer it after the show. People have asked me, is paleo just another weight loss fad? I've heard of the paleo diet. I think it's just for weight loss. And yes, you can lose weight on paleo. Certainly if you are eating a lot of refined grains and a lot of sugar, and you probably are not eating very many vegetables. A lot of people eat a lot more fruit than they do vegetables. And you switch to a diet where you're really focused on vegetables and fruits and healthy meats. You can only eat so much protein. So you'll really end up eating a lot of plant material. You probably will lose weight if you're needing to lose weight. But no, it's not a fad. If you really read about paleo, you will find it is much more often talked about as a diet that leads towards health than a diet that is for weight loss. So what do you feed your kids? That's another common question. I feed my kids the same thing I feed myself, with a few exceptions like I talked about. You know, they get more dairy than I do. They certainly get more sweets. Grandparents like to give the kids sugar, and so we allow that because that's not an everyday occurrence. But otherwise, they eat what we eat. I actually have a sample lunch because for some reason people think lunch is hard. So my kids love vegetables. I'm very thankful. I don't know that we did anything that made them love vegetables, but they do. We do in fact have a large garden, and it's really fun for them to go and pick vegetables right out of the garden and eat them right there. I don't spray any pesticides. We don't have the yard treated with chemicals. We have a natural lawn care company. So I feel like even if it's dirty, they want to just eat the tomato right off the vine or the pea or whatever, it's okay. They'll pick a pepper and just eat a whole pepper, spit out the seeds. So I have pepper plants growing all over where I don't want them. But that's okay. They're eating vegetables and they're happy for it. So this is a typical lunch for them. They'll really fill up their plate with vegetables. Some salad greens. They don't usually eat salad dressing, which is crazy. But they'll just eat some greens. They love these little peppers. Have you seen these? They come in a bag, yellow, orange, red. They love these. Some carrots, string cheese sometimes, a piece of fruit. Usually I'll cut the apple. They won't each get a whole apple. And then I love this smoked boneless turkey breast. If I have time, I'll buy a turkey breast and I'll roast it. Sometimes I'll buy a boar's head because theirs is gluten-free. It's pretty pure. I'm going to turn my sauce off. Are we back? We paused for a second there. Sorry about that. So my sauce really cooked down. I let it go a little bit too much, but that's okay. It's real syrupy. I don't have a real condensed flavor, which is fine. So I'm going to set it back on the stove. The stove is off. So it'll be waiting for my chicken to come out. This is a smoked turkey breast. They have this at Whole Foods, and it's just turkey, and it tastes really good. My kids love ham, and even at 9 and 11 I can fool them and say this is ham, but it's turkey because it tastes a little bit like ham. It's got that smoky flavor. And then they usually do get some chips. Sometimes I'll fry them, plantain chips, but I have just found these. These are Inca brand plantain chips. The hard thing about chips is the oils. Plantains are a fine food. They're acceptable on the paleo diet. You can find sweet potato chips, but they're usually cooked in corn oil, canola oil, sunflower oil. These Inca chips are palm oil, which is a coconut product, so that's acceptable. And then there's this Boulder brand. They have potato chips cooked in coconut oil and avocado oil, and they taste amazing. They're so good. I find these at Kroger here in Raleigh, North Carolina, but I've seen them at specialty food stores. Whole Foods carries them. Obviously they're a better price at Kroger. And you can probably find them online, but these are really, really good. So that's a typical lunch. Breakfast, the kids will eat some gluten-free cereal. They like Cheerios, which thankfully they're all gluten-free now. They'll make toast with the gluten-free bread, and then we try to get them to eat eggs a couple times a week. They just don't love eggs, so I try not to shove them down their throats. Bacon, of course, they're happy to have bacon. When we first went paleo, man, we have bacon all the time because bacon is okay on the paleo diet. So you really need to be buying good quality bacon that's not preserved with the nitrates and the nitrites and the animals that are treated without hormones and antibiotics. There are all those qualifications, but if you meet those qualifications, then the bacon is okay. So we were having a lot of bacon. I have some great recipes on my blog. Again, that's ourpaleofamily.com. And I have some fun breakfast recipes like pumpkin pancakes. There are pancakes made with plantains and bananas, and you can make cinnamon rolls. I have a great cinnamon roll recipe for a special occasion. Yes, Christy's saying, can you give me some yummy foods we can eat? So I think that's what I'm doing right now. So again, if you go to my blog, you'll see that there are tons of recipes. I've got entree recipes. I have salads and vegetables and side dishes. And I was just talking about breakfast foods. You can make banana bread, but we don't do that every day. Most days, my husband makes an omelet with eggs. He'll put some cheese and ham usually, and maybe a piece of fruit. I'll make a scramble for myself a lot of times. I don't eat a lot of leftover meat. Leftover meat makes me a little bit sick, but I will cook extra vegetables at dinner, and then for breakfast I'll have those vegetables with some either pork, or sometimes I'll buy sausage if I can find one that doesn't have some oils in it that I can't eat, or a lot of sugar. But usually I just buy plain ground pork, and then I season it the way I like, and those leftover vegetables. If I'm going to exercise and I feel like I need some more carbs, then I'll maybe have a banana or an apple with some almond butter. There's my chicken again. Let me get that out. I see a bunch of comments just popped up, and I don't know if that's because we're having some problems with the connection because of the storm, or if y'all just tuned in, but either way, welcome. So I'm going to turn my chicken back over. So it's had 30 minutes. It needs another 15 minutes. I like it to get nice and brown. So I'm going to put a little bit of this on. This is the back side, so I don't want to put a whole bunch of my sauce on the back side. I'm just going to put a little bit on there. So again, when people think about, when you tell them, oh, here's this diet, you can't eat all this list of things, they think, oh, what can I eat? I'm just going to be eating salad. But no, you can eat salad, sure, but you can make some really amazing dishes with lots of great flavor. Use lots of herbs, lots of fresh fruit in your sauces, like this orange sauce. Okay, this is going back in the oven. I'm going to lean in so I can see my screen and see if I can see a couple of your questions. Okay, what do we eat in a typical day? So So that's what I've been talking about. So breakfast, I think I just covered breakfast. I showed you a lunch for my kids. I said my husband usually takes leftovers. I'm not very good about feeding myself lunch. It is usually something very fast, like a salad with some turkey and avocado. I try to make, salad with just some meat. That's not going to get me very far. I usually work out in the middle of the day, so I really am needing a lot more calories during that meal, but it's the hardest meal for me to put together. So if I do a salad, I'll have a great big plate of greens, a decent amount of meat, not like one slice of turkey, but 4 ounces of turkey, and half of an avocado, usually some chopped almonds, maybe half a green apple, and then balsamic vinegar and olive oil. I have actually a couple salad dressing recipes on the blog that are really simple too, but a little bit more to it than just olive oil and vinegar. And that's a real hearty lunch, and that'll keep me full. That's what I eat most of the time. If I'm super busy, I might just roll up some meat and eat a few carrots real fast. Right now we have lots of tomatoes and cucumbers coming in from the garden. So the other day I had turkey with cucumbers and I just dipped it in my salad dressing. So that's a that's a lunch, sorry. Let me give you some dinner recipe ideas. And again, there are lots of these on the blog. My recipes that I make are very much sort of family favorites that I grew up eating, or foods that I used to cook that the kids loved, and thought, oh, we can't have these anymore because we're eating paleo. So I figured out ways to redo them. And some of the substitutions are really simple, like spaghetti. Instead of having pasta, you cook a spaghetti squash, and it strings out like little spaghetti noodles. And it's kind of sweet, and I have to admit my kids don't love spaghetti squash. But I figured out that I can use spaghetti squash in a quiche, and they like it that way. But most normal children like spaghetti squash because it is kind of sweet and it's fun, and it's a vegetable, and it's filling in for the pasta. So things like that are kind of a simple substitution. People ask me a lot, oh, I'm having some friends come over, stay with me for the weekend, and they're paleo. What do I cook for them? And they're really stressed out about it. And so in those instances, I just say, keep it really simple. You grill some meat. You can grill burgers or chicken or even hot dogs. You can find grass-fed beef hot dogs that have no fillers or artificial ingredients in them. A pretty pure food in a fun form. So grill some meat, saute some vegetables, or make a big salad, have fruit for dessert. And that's a great healthy meal. You can bake sweet potatoes. You can slice your sweet potatoes and bake them in the shape of French fries. You have sweet potato fries. We have those all the time. I've made baked chicken nuggets. I fried stuff too. Everybody loves fried food, and so I came up with a great tempura batter. And we fried shrimp, and we fried chicken, and we fried even vegetables. And it was really, really good, but it makes a huge mess. And that is not something that I just feel like messing with and cleaning up on a regular basis. So we don't have fried things very often. We do lots of slow cooking roasts, especially in the winter time, which again, that's something that you probably have, and if you're not paleo, and it's totally paleo. Sometimes recipes will call for you to dust your meat with flour. Just leave that out. It's totally fine. Salt and pepper your meat just like I did the chicken. Brown it in the pan, add your sauce ingredients, which is usually some broth, which is very nutrient-dense food, carrots, onions, celery. Put that in the oven to really slow cook, and you have this delicious roast. It's totally a paleo meal. But I've made some fancy things, like we'll make pizza crust out of cauliflower, pizza crust out of meat. So you take your ground meat. My favorite way now, I don't think I've posted this on the blog yet, but sometimes I would make a crust out of shredded sweet potato, and sometimes I would make a crust out of ground meat. And I thought, what if we mix those two together? So I shredded a couple sweet potatoes in the food processor, and I took my pound of ground meat, and I mixed that together with just some salt and pepper, maybe oregano, some Italian herbs, and pat that into your, like a 9x13 pan, and bake it for a few minutes. And that's your pizza crust. And usually your ground meat will have some fat in it that you would have to pour out if you just did a meat crust. But the sweet potato absorbs that little bit of fat, so you don't have to mess with pouring that out. And then you just top it with your regular pizza toppings, cheese if you want, and bake it, and it's delicious. Everybody loves that. We do try to eat a lot of fish. That's one thing my doctor says. My omega-3s are kind of low. We need to eat salmon a couple times a week. Fresh salmon is really expensive. So we'll try to do, I'll buy it when it's on sale and put it in the freezer. So we'll have like a fresh piece of salmon, and then we'll often have canned salmon. I'll make salmon patties. Oh, somebody says, do you find it expensive to eat paleo? Yes, I mean, yes, it can be. And I was actually going to do a whole show on budget paleo, but I'll just address this briefly. I was a really good coupon shopper. I would pride myself on coming home from the drugstore with my bag full of free shampoo and free soap and dollar razors and that sort of thing. And I'd stock up on cereal with all the coupons. And I don't know, we were spending like $100 a week on groceries at the most, including toilet paper and shampoo and all that kind of stuff. And then we switched to paleo, and you know, I told you about this great book, Practical Paleo, and I just went through it and I cooked what she said. So if she said you got salmon, I got salmon, shrimp, I got shrimp, it was steak, I got steak, and our grocery bill went sky high. I mean, over $1,000 a month in groceries. And I, you know, was like, whoa, we have to stop this. So I started being a lot more discerning, and I would read the recipe, and if it called for, say, a nice cut of meat, I would use ground beef. And I would still buy grass-fed, which is what is recommended. Those are the healthiest animals. But we almost only eat grass-fed ground beef. We very rarely eat a steak or another cut of meat. Just like the chicken tonight, I said, I don't usually buy boneless, skinless chicken breasts. If I do, I buy them frozen in the bag. That's the cheapest way. But I'll usually buy the skin on, bone in, dark meat chicken. And my family loves it. I probably prefer white meat a little bit more, but they really like the dark meat, and I mean, I'm fine with it. And it is a lot cheaper. And then, like I said at the beginning of the show, you have those bones that you can save. I have my bone bag, which sounds really disgusting. But after everybody eats, I take their bones and I put them in the freezer, and when I have a big bag full, I will make broth with them, and then I use that broth in my cooking and making soups and things. So I'll talk more about budget in another show, but yes, it can be very expensive, but there are ways around it. It's still more expensive than eating the standard American diet way. I mean, there's no 39-cent boxes of pasta in our diet. So there's just no way to get around some of that. The quality food is more expensive, but we're saving for it in our health, is the way I look at it. Any more questions? I'm trying to see if there's some more questions. I think I've answered those that are there. If you have any more, please be sure to. Somebody said, will you post this recipe later? It is on my blog. Again, that's ourpaleofamily.com, and it's called Citrus Glazed Chicken Thighs, Baked Chicken Thighs with Citrus Glaze. That's what it's called. It's one of the first ones I put up there. So that's up there. I want to show you something fun to do with your kids. I told you we have a big garden, and one thing we started doing a couple years ago was growing sweet potatoes. And kids just love to grow their own food. It's really exciting to take some tiny little seed out of a packet, and then a few months later you have a tomato. Now see, there's a little squirrel that is visiting my garden and started to eat this tomato, but I kept it. I'll just cut that off. We'll eat it anyway. But sweet potatoes are so neat because you take the potato and you cut it in half, and it's the root end, the end that looks kind of usually brown like that, and you put it in water, so the bottom is in water. See, I've stuck toothpicks in it so it's not totally submerged. It's resting there on the edge of the cup, and roots will start to grow out of the bottom, and then leaves will start to grow out of the top, and it will take about a month, maybe up to 6 weeks. Kind of depends on how much sun. If you need to pay attention to it. Change the water about once a week. Keep the water in there so the roots stay wet. But these will grow. You can see there's already a couple leaves, and once the leaves are about this big, I think technically you're supposed to have 4 or 5 full-size leaves. You don't plant the potato. You don't plant the roots, which seems silly. You break those leaves off the top, not the leaf, but the whole stem with the leaves. You break that off and plant that in your soil, and sweet potatoes grow from that. And it's amazing. And this is actually a sweet potato. It's a white variety called a Hannah sweet potato. They're not quite as sweet as the orange variety. I like them a lot better. Last year we grew the Hannahs, we grew regular orange sweet potatoes, and we grew purple sweet potatoes. And I have moles or voles that were eating my plants, and they ate every single orange sweet potato. They did not eat the purple ones or the white ones, but they ate all of the orange ones. It was crazy. I had, as big as my board here, I had a box heaping full of potatoes. They were all white and purple, not any orange ones. So this year I'm going to try really hard to grow some orange potatoes. So one thing people ask about paleo is why sweet potatoes and not white potatoes? What is the difference? Well, it kind of depends on who you ask. Some people will say, well, the white potato is a whole food, and so it's okay on paleo. And I kind of feel that way too, to a certain degree. Some white potatoes are okay, but the fact is, both white potatoes and sweet potatoes are high glycemic index foods, which means you eat them, your blood sugar spikes, which means your body releases a lot of insulin. And that's okay. That's the way it's supposed to happen. That's what makes your cells then absorb that glucose so your body can use it. But you don't want a lot of insulin all the time. So that's why when you have people who are eating a lot of sugar and they're constantly feeding their bodies these high glycemic foods, they develop insulin resistance, which means your body isn't responding to the insulin, and so it produces more and more insulin, and then you end up with type 2 diabetes, which leads to a host of other problems. That's a bad place to be. So they're both high glycemic index foods, but the difference between white and sweet is that white potatoes have these things called anti-nutrients, specifically saponins and lectins. And the saponins are actually sort of a soap-like material that the potato produces to protect itself from being eaten by voles or by being eaten from other pests, and they're poisonous to humans. And most Americans are eating enough white potatoes that we're at that range where we're sort of absorbing a toxic amount of the saponins. And lectins are another anti-nutrient. They are found in other foods as well, but they contribute to leaky gut, which sounds really disgusting, and it is what it sounds like. It's when the very tight, they're actually called tight junctions in your digestive system, they're supposed to remain tight and only allow through particles of food once they've been broken down to the very, very finest levels for your body to absorb your proteins and your carbohydrates and your fats once they're way broken down. When you have lectins and some of these other anti-nutrients, nuts have a lot of them if they're not treated properly. Gluten is a major cause of leaky gut. These tight junctions open up, they're not tight anymore, and they start to let out larger proteins, and that's what your body recognizes as foreign and starts to attack, and that's kind of the genesis of autoimmune disease. So potatoes are not the devil by any means, but they do have these elements in them that are problematic. So you think about how often you might eat potato chips or french fries or mashed potatoes. Most of us aren't eating a baked potato when we eat white potatoes. We're eating french fries and potato chips. We're eating a lot of them. So definitely try to limit the white potatoes and have more sweet potatoes. They're a great source of carbohydrate. When you're exercising, you need the energy. What about snacks? People ask about that too because kids are always hungry, right? But if you think about what your kids are usually eating, it's for snacks, it's usually carbohydrates. I mean, the best case scenario is generally fruit, which is still a simple carbohydrate. You've got your goldfish and all your other snack crackers, the fruit gummy things, candy, of course, if you give them a treat like a cookie. That's just a lot of quick carbohydrates, and you know how you feel when you fuel your body with quick carbohydrates. You need more. It doesn't last very long. So my kids, I tell them they can have one unhealthy snack a day and one healthy snack. And they usually have two, maybe sometimes 3 snacks a day. But the unhealthy snack is some of these chips, like I showed you, the plantain chips or the avocado oil potato chips. Sometimes they'll have a cookie, but it's something that I've made with whole ingredients, and it's a paleo cookie. They love beef jerky. I think the first recipe I posted on the blog was a beef jerky recipe. They surprise me with the things that they like. I think if you just put healthy foods in front of your kids, they taste good and they know that their body feels good. They might not really process that, but they are feeling good when they're eating good foods, and so they'll come back for that. And I just realized I forgot to set my timer when I put the chicken back in. So I'm looking at my clock. It's been close to an hour, so I'm gonna take my chicken out in just a second when I finish talking about snacks, and flip it over one more time so it really gets nice and brown on top. Dried nuts and fruit. I try to keep stuff out because if they see it, then that's what they're gonna go for. So we've got a bowl of fruit on the counter. I've got a jar of raisins. I've got a jar of almonds. If you have an Aldi where you live, Aldi is amazing. Aldi is owned by the same company that owns Trader Joe's. So they carry a lot of the same products for a lower price. But they're actually one of the few places I can find a nut that's roasted and salted, but there's no oil, which is great. That's exactly what I want. So they have some good snack options, dried fruits and things there. So they do that. And those are most of their snacks. I try to always get them to eat some protein, which is why they end up eating more cheese than I would really like, because they don't want to eat a lot of nuts. And I obviously don't make beef jerky all the time, because that's a more expensive cut of meat. So that's an expensive snack. That's sort of like if we're going to go camping, we're going on a trip, and we need, sometimes I'll make a meal out of beef jerky when we're traveling if there isn't a good option otherwise. So that's not something we have around all the time. The dried fruits and nuts are a good option. So let me pull my chicken out and check on that and show you how it's looking. And you see, that's the back side. It's the back side of chicken. Got just a little bit of glaze. If I weren't distracted with talking to you in the storm, I probably would have added a little bit more orange juice maybe to my sauce, since I let it reduce a little too far. Just to get a little bit more out of it. Let me show you what this chicken, can you see? It's nice and golden. The skin gets really crispy, and I actually like the skin when it gets like that. Oh yeah, I let it sit there too long. My sauce got a little thick. So don't talk too much while you're making your sauce, so you don't let it get too thick. I'm going to scrape every bit of it out of here and then try to distribute it along, because it will sort of loosen up when I put it back in the oven. There's a lot down in the skillet already, so it's going to have this great flavor. It just doesn't look quite as pretty. Okay, so my chicken, I think, is done, but I'm going to check it. If you don't have a meat thermometer, that's another tool that I really recommend you have. I always overcooked my meat, especially on the grill, until I got a meat thermometer. 160 to 170 means it's cooked, and this is registering 198, so it's definitely cooked. But like I was telling you earlier, dark meat chicken, it just doesn't seem to get dried out and tough. I'm going to leave it in there for a few more minutes because I just want my skin a little bit more crispy, and I'm going to wrap up here with you. And it is almost 9 o'clock at night. We're going to eat that tomorrow night. And what I'm going to fix with that is some squash. I actually have some summer squash in the garden right now. So I'll probably saute an onion, and again I'll use my bacon fat. Okay, I'm back. Sorry, we disconnected again for a second. So I will saute some vegetables, and I might cook some rice. I was going to talk about this. I'll kind of talk about this in closing. There are lots of people who have written different books on paleo, and a lot of them advise you to do an elimination diet. One I particularly liked is Chris Kresser's book called Your Paleo Code, I think. And again, I have this on my blog. I have recommended all these books. I've written them down. And I liked the way it was simple, and he explained, and he talks about doing an elimination diet. And the whole idea of the elimination diet is to figure out what foods you can eat. So you would do a really strict paleo diet 100%. So try to do it when you're not traveling, or it's not a holiday for sure, not your birthday or anything special like that. And stick really strictly to the tenets of the paleo diet. So no refined sugars, no refined oils, no legumes, no dairy, and no grains. And then in a very methodical way, you add foods back in. And one of the foods that we've been able to add back in successfully is white rice. And everybody else eats it pretty well with no problems, and I can eat it without problems, but I only eat a small amount. So every few weeks I might have a half a cup to a cup of rice. But that doesn't bother me. So that's probably something that I would serve with this meal. Kind of, again, has that Asian flavor. So we've got our stir-fried vegetables, our yummy chicken, and the rice. And if you wanted, I mean, everybody likes sauce, right? You could double the sauce, and again, not cook it down quite as much as I did, and then you'd have some of that sauce to drizzle over your chicken at the end. So I think that's, let me see if I have one more question. I think I've answered the questions that are there. But thank you so much for tuning in. I'm going to grab the chicken out just to show it to you one more time. And again, my sauce is kind of globbed up right there. You see it's nice and golden brown. It'll be really tender and juicy on the inside. I'm going to stick it back in the oven. That recipe's on the blog. That's the baked chicken thighs with citrus glaze. Make sure you like the KidCast page. Don't forget to do that. And I will be back. I'm going to try to do this once a week. And the next time I'll make some more recipes for you. I'll really focus on how we do this paleo thing in an economical way, or as economically as possible, and some quick and easy recipes for summer. So thanks so much for tuning in. I'm Elizabeth Hines, and thanks for watching.